Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 219 of CryptoBiography. It is part 14 of Snake Magic, and Neidre was about to meet the leader of the nasrach, whose name is Brennine. Brennine and the others were all standing, and in fact, the area had no throne or other outward sign of power. Nevertheless, it was instantly obvious which one was in control. Brennine simply had that sort of aura. The leaders were speaking amongst themselves in the nasrach tongue. It made Neidre aware again of how much she had to learn. "Hold a moment here," Hefred advised her. She left Neidre near the top of the stairs and approached Brennine. The conversation stopped, and the leaders looked first at Hefred, then at Neidre. Neidre wasn't sure where to look, so she looked mostly at Hefred and some at Brennine. As she approached, Hefred said a few sentences in nasrach, and Brennine said some back, then looked at Neidre levelly. Neidre wasn't able to read the emotions behind that look. Brennine then looked back at Hefred. Hefred, who was every bit as tall as Neidre, seemed very small next to Brennine, yet Brennine was not particularly tall in herself. Instead, she carried herself with authority, and that seemed to increase her size. Brennine moved to the side of the platform, in the shade but away from the other leaders. Hefred, who seemed to have an understanding with her, followed. As she slithered, Brennine waved at Neidre to join them. Neidre moved forward until she was less than a tail's length from Brennine and Hefred. "Please, let us talk," Brennine said in the human tongue. "Yes," Neidre said, and slid forward to a closer but still respectful distance. Brennine seemed satisfied. "Hefred told me a bit about you, some before you were freed and more just now," Brennine said. "But would you mind telling me your story?" "My story?" "The story of your life. The only story any of us really have." Neidre looked up at Brennine. Her posture was remarkable. She seemed to float above her tail instead of resting on it, and that ability seemed to make her half again taller than Neidre. She realized she was slouching a little and straightened up. "I was raised from infancy by the humans, then sold to Caedmon the magician. I worked in the kitchens. Then I was tapped to join the expedition as the cook. Looking back, I think they wanted to use me as a possible trading chip from the beginning, but I didn't know that, of course. I was told very little. Hefred, during the attack of the humans, came and helped me get away. I've been following her since then." Brennine just smiled. Neidre felt nervous, as though she had left something important out. "I thank you all for getting me free." Brennine's smile did not change, but she did say quietly, "Our pleasure." She did not say anything else. Eventually Neidre said, "I don't know what else to say." "Is that all to your story?" "That's all I can think to tell." "How about how it ends?" For a moment Neidre wondered if this was a threat. "Ends?" "You've had a long time under the yoke of the humans. Now you're free. What comes next?" "I don't know. I've never been free before, not free to choose, not really." "What would you like to do with your life? Have you ever yearned for anything in all those lonely days among the humans?" "I don't know. I never really saw a future. I knew they wouldn't free me, and as a nasrach I stood out too much to get away. I never really even tried to escape. So I didn't think about what would happen if I did." Stood out isn't a nasrach phrase, she thought to herself. "We can give you that time." "Hefred seemed to think I would be questioned to see if I was a spy or something. Is that what this is? I'm confused." "Please, I could tell you weren't a spy the instant I saw you. I didn't even have to use any magic. You were frightened, yet not nervous. You didn't know what was going to happen, but there was no deviousness or guile in you. So, if that will put you at ease, welcome, Neidre. Since you don't know what you want, I suggest you go amongst us, try different things, and see what interests you." "That would be wonderful," Neidre said. "If there is one thing I'm curious about, it's learning to do a bit more magic, which I've only done accidentally." She gestured at her 2 colorful scales. You may start there, then. Perhaps that will be your calling, or perhaps it will lead you to it. Do you bear any anger in your heart towards the humans who enslaved you? Neidre had to think about this. Towards some of them, yes. Towards the cruel ones, and Caedmon who owns us all. But a lot of them were just cogs like us, even if they weren't owned. The cook was a decent human. He helped me prepare for the journey in the wagon train. So if you're asking if I want to war against humans, no, I wouldn't like that. I'll help us defend, if needed. But even against the worst of them, I don't want to go back and kill them or anything. Although, I would like to see the other demi-humans freed. Especially Martha, she added to herself. Very well. Feel free to explore the city and its people, and find what interests you. Heffred, will you continue to be her guide for a while longer? Gladly, Heffred said. They slid down from the leader's platform. I've got a room as the head of the scouts. Well, all the scouts have room. I just have one to myself. Oh, nice. I'm interested to see what a real nasrach room looks like. Well, good news. The room was designed for 2, and since I got it, I haven't bothered to change it. So, you can take the other bed. Thanks, Neidre said. Is it far? Rather. I'll try to point out the important landmarks along the way. So, Neidre saw the hospital, which Heffred described with its magical healing, and the library, which interested her very much, though she couldn't read in any language, and the military barracks. Are the books in the library in nasrach, or human, or both? She asked. Both, Heffred answered. Our writing was behind theirs, so a lot of works are in the human tongue. But increasingly we are writing down our own knowledge and passing it along to future nasrach. We've even found special magical inks and papers that resist fading and damage, short of tearing or burning. Can you read? Yes, but mostly in nasrach. I speak human well enough, but I need to practice reading it. When did you learn human if you weren't raised among them? From some freed nasrach, who are teaching whoever needs or wants to learn the tongue. In my case, there was always the chance that a scout might need to talk with a human, so I took it upon myself a few years ago to learn. My initiative was part of what led me to become the scouting leader. Neidre could hear the pride in Heffred's voice. Well, yes, you speak it very well, she said. I'm afraid I'm going to feel like quite an outsider. I don't know a word of nasrach. You'll learn quickly enough once you're around it all the time, Heffred said. In fact, even before you learn magic, you should know some basics of nasrach. It'll let you learn much faster. Besides, human isn't a terribly common skill among us, so you'll want to dive into the language right away. In fact, I'll teach you some. After all, I'm supposed to show you around, and how can I do that without some proper communication? That sounds excellent, Neidre said. Finally, they got to Heffred's room. It was not too large, though Heffred assured her it was some 4 times larger than a normal one nasrach room. It had a desk, which had a single book on it. What are you reading? Neidre asked. There were no words on the cover, even if she could read. Writing, Heffred replied. I'm keeping a journal. It helps me remember. And remembering details is very important in my work. I also have a very small volume that I take with me to jot down information. Neidre nodded. She looked around and saw 2 of what she could only think of as hammocks. Are those nasrach beds? Yep, the one with a little trunk under it is yours. I've been using the space for storage. Let's pull it out of there, she said, and they both pulled the trunk to the middle of the next wall. The hammock bed was large, strongly built, for nasrach tended to weigh more than humans due to the bulk of their tails, and had connections from all 4 corners. But it was clearly meant for a nasrach to crawl into it and curl up and let their body weight keep the balance. Looks comfortable, Neidre said. Have you slept in a hammock while you were held by the humans? Heffred asked. Oh no, never, Neidre said. There were a couple of them that were strung up between 2 trees sometimes when the weather was nice, and the humans would nap in them. Yeah, these are basically the same, though we prefer this style with 4 connection points. Some even like ones with 3. They allow us to curl up in more comfortable ways, though I have a 2-tree hammock that I bring on longer missions. I love it already, Neidre said. The straw bed I made was fine enough, but I think this'll be perfect. Yes, Hefford said, and with us above the floor and bundled up a bit, it can be cozy even when it gets cold. Why don't you try it? Neidre approached her hammock, and though she wasn't sure exactly how one mounted the thing, she looped part of the middle of her tail and then followed it. She almost instantly found a comfortable coiled position deep in the hammock. This is perfect, Neidre said. Glad you like it, Hefford said with a slight laugh in her voice. She seemed to find her newness to a standard bed slightly amusing. Do you need to sleep? We have time before we go find an evening meal. I would have said no before lying in this hammock, Neidre said. And now? Yes, please. Hefford looped over her own hammock. I'll do the same then. A good scout can sleep anytime, anywhere, you know. They had a good nap, and the sun had moved a fair bit when they woke up. And that's the story for this week. Obviously, there's more to come. Still enjoying writing about Neidre and Hefford and so on. Hope you're enjoying listening to it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and music copyright 2021, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.